This is update for November 4, 2022, day 254 of the war, and of the date update. So, as you can see, I'm going to discuss a little bit Asia because things are getting very tense there. I was talking about China recently a lot, and that's what I'm going to do today again. Because as I said, it's really heading towards the war, and probably sooner than later. So let's first see what's going on. So I spoke about the China sort of fixing its relationship with Vietnam, right? So which they formally did. They control Burma here, and now the Chinese prime minister is going to Cambodia, right? So the whole point of all of this is to ensure that during the attack on Taiwan, all of this area is going to remain neutral, and China is not going to get backstabbed out of this area, right? So it's under sort of control. Then China has at least, well, not control, but guarantee that Pakistan is not going to do anything. This whole area is obviously also kind of quiet. China has a lot of influence on Kazakhstan. So the only question is really just India, and that's pretty much it. And if you look in this, well, obviously there is 100% support from Russia. There's no question about that. Then also from North Korea, just for those who um, don't sort of understand, North Korea is basically China. This is a Chinese puppet regime. It's really China just disguised as North Korea. So it's kind of similar relationship as Russia and Belarus, where it's really just they do Belarus does what Russia needs, and essentially just extension, just another sort of like a puppet or mask on the international affairs. But it's all you know don't fool yourself, it's all just China essentially. So that's why you see their activity out of North Korea, shooting these missiles and all of that, just to kind of create stress in South Korea and Japan, and potentially kind of like tie them up so they not focus on situation in Taiwan. So essentially the only question is still remaining with this kind of like a uh, what is that, southeastern part of Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. Obviously, Australia is definitely not going to be friend of China, but it's far enough so and small enough not to be critical for China. Uh, so that's plus Iran, as we all know, even though there is revolution going on there, but whether it succeed or not, nobody knows. So Turkey is guaranteed to be neutral. So essentially, China is kind of like ensuring basically neutrality of the most of the at least Asia. And Saudi Arabia is going to be neutral. Recently, it has really bad relationship with the U.S. Then Qatar is also actually have sort of somewhat sort of negative tones because actually I forgot to mention yesterday when UK tried to introduce this crude oil price ceiling through the marine insurance. Qatar actually said that if they try to do it, they will stop supplying of natural gas or something like that. So basically, this whole system is really not working. This whole energy policy that's being pursued by the West, by the current governments in the West, let's put this way, is absolutely giving ammunition in the hands of Russia and China. I wouldn't say Iran, but essentially uh, it's it's strengthening the rivals. Let's put this way. So why I'm sort of saying like, okay, what else is going on in China that makes it very, I would say, dangerous? So first of all, um, German Chancellor or Prime Minister visited China, and there Xi Jinping, who is, as we all know, leader of China, just openly, very openly told without even like sort of any kind of like diplomacy or anything, openly said, you know what, Europe should not be controlled by the third party, meaning US, right? So and also he said like, okay, let's boycott this sanctions that are being applied to Russia. Well, he didn't say Russia, but essentially that's, it's a double speak there, right? So basically it's like he's basically trying to mm, his goal is basically create a crack or wedge in the West, in Europe, using obviously Germany or Scholz as a tool to do that. Because first, that created already wedge inside of his sort of government and coalition. I mean, it was coalition from the very beginning. It also created drifts with France, where the French president didn't go on the trip. So this creates really a big crack in continental Europe, right? Because the two largest economic engines are France and Germany, and now there is basically bad relationship there. So it's China so far playing all of its cards politically extremely wisely and extremely successfully. So what they did, what they offered to Scholz in return, basically, and also very, let's say, cleverly, they signed an agreement to buy 140 um, Airbus airplanes, which is roughly worth of 17 billion US dollars. So as you can see, they play this. They they not they not kindergarten. They play it in a very clever way. Then additional statement that was made by Minister of Defense of China saying that U.S. position, basically U.S. position forces China to prepare for the war. That's it kind of all of this together kind of tells us that 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 this war is probably going to happen sooner than later, and probably much sooner than many people expect. So that's a situation with China that's I think uh, extremely explosive, and reality of it, as I explained, is uh, it's not war against Russia's war against Ukraine. It's really like two huge plates are colliding, essentially China and US, and essentially two blocks are built around that. Is one is China, Russia, Iran, and many countries are sort of silently participating in it, and then also obviously West, where, as you can see, there are cracks where Germany is sort of trying to do its own thing. So that's really what's happening from the really big picture perspective. Also, National Security Advisor, U.S. National Security Advisor, visited Ukraine on Friday and assured Ukrainian president that the supplies of weapons will continue. Probably try to sort of ensure that after the elections, where it looks like Democratic side is going to lose and Republican side is going to win, because there's a lot of sort of fear what's going to happen as a result of that. So apparently there were some kind of assurances that things will not change. And if they do, then that actually will really embolden China. By the way, so many people sort of in US saying that, okay, this support of Ukraine is really just about support of Ukraine. No, it's a holistic uh, system. It's a holistic game where all of this is extremely interconnected, and it's all part of one big system. And unfortunately, in US, people are not trained to think in systems. They train to like very have like myopic view at specific situation without considering, like without really thinking holistically. And that's sort of the weakness that actually China is really exploiting, and Russia as well, because there is approach, they have sort of strong systemic thinking, and that's where these dictatorships are stronger organizationally relative to the West. Let's put it this way. Um, so other things that are happening is crude oil now pushing back to $100 and probably will go higher, given the whole backdrop that we're seeing. Also, U.S. Exhausted its strategic petroleum reserves, so it stopped releases at least for now because it's so low that essentially you if you continue doing it for much longer, you're gonna run dry basically. Plus all of that looming EU embargo on Russian crude is starting December 5. Plus all of that crude oil ceiling, it all creates explosive situation with energy. And again, this will, if this goes the way it goes, and there is no indication that it will change direction, this is going to be a really difficult situation, like in terms of inflation, in terms of energy, in terms of the supplies. It can, as I said before, royally backfire against the West and create very explosive and dangerous social situation in countries. It's already creating, as I said before, in Moldova, in Czech Republic. I'm sure there are other countries where are problems similar to that, and so this again want to highlight that this whole approach, this war on conventional energy, because that's what's really happening. Because all of the sanctions and all, it's just excuse to continue the war on conventional energy. It creates problem within inside of West, but it also alienates many sort of other countries around the world against the West, and that's where the problem is, because essentially it forces those countries into hands of China as being at least neutral. Some of them may become allies, and obviously Russia so as well. Um, so, and that also what this really means, that inflation is not gonna stop, and that what next step is that U.S. Federal Reserve will have to hike interest rates even higher, which will literally create some kind of depression in the West. It's already we there's still no sort of visibility, but the mortgage rates in the U.S. are like above 7%. That it's most people are like, this is U.S. just example because they are the highest, like relative in the West, and people or the average consumer over levered and they cannot afford that. So this is really gonna like basically like a have a cold stop on the whole housing sector, other sectors of economy. And what this really means, basically, at this mortgage rate, this really means that U.S. housing will need to crash by at least 40% and probably more. So that's going to be much worse than 2008, where the crash was about like let's say 30%. Don't remember exact number, but like slightly below 30, but let's call it 30%. So this could lead to really devastating economic hurricane in the West and in the U.S. specifically. So that's a world we're living in. So just prepare yourself the way you can to the best of your abilities. That's all I can say. Now let's switch. Actually, I'll to totally different topic. Actually, tactical warfare, and we're gonna look at the example of because I talk frequently like, okay, Ukrainian troops you know don't know how to attack, and like really like sometimes Russian troops like sort of win, and like what happens and why Ukrainian troops cannot break through the Russian defenses at this point, and why there is heavy losses and nothing to show for those heavy losses. This is going to be example actually from this is illustrative example first of all, right? So everybody understands it's not taking literally from some specific area. It just schematically explains you how things work and why so far Russian defenses are holding. And specifically, this is taken from the Kherson bridgehead, sort of like typical, like sort of uh, recent Russian defensive positions. So let me explain you, because maybe I didn't drew it very clearly. But the way it works, this green sort of lines, they represent rows of the trees. So if you the nature geography there is the land is more or less pretty flat, but then there were artificially planted rows of trees in like 50s and 60s to prevent soil erosion. And usually it's like 2 or 3 rows of trees. So it's pretty narrow. It's, I don't know, like 15, 20 meters wide, maybe 25, something like that, maybe 30. But basically, and those sort of rows usually about like 1.5 to 2 kilometers away from each other. So that's why you see like this row here, this row here, this row here, and this row here. And then there's also, um, horizontal rows as well. So basically, the whole like defensive, because there is nothing where you can find cover. So both sides are using those rows of trees as at least some kind of cover, even though it's totally poor cover. But if there is nothing, people try to use that. So this is, you can see Ukrainian positions, and then Russians would be on the opposite side, another row of this row of the trees. So let me explain this whole schematic here, how Russian defenses are working. So the first line of defense is really just kind of like reconnaissance and spotting teams, just not much of like sort of real defensive line. However, they are protected by the minefields in front and behind, right? So this is minefields here. And their role is really to spot attacking Ukrainian troops and to delay them for as much as they can, just to delay. The main defensive line is actually here, the second one. That's where the infantry is with anti tank rockets or launchers, right? So that's where they are, and then obviously the large caliber machine guns and so on. And then there is a third line where actually like reinforcements are. So basically here you have tanks and IFVs, right? And then behind them you have artillery, Russian artillery. This is self-propelled. This is signed for self-propelled howitzers. So I just want to show that there are all kinds of artillery. So when Ukrainian troops try to attack, and they usually use like small teams, they like, even let's say they lucky they get through, they didn't get bogged down in the mine on the minefield. They got stuck, but they get to the Russian position, this Russian spotters position. They may kick them out. However, they once they get there, they sort of, again, they have another minefield next, in front of them, and then this line of defense starts shooting at them, so they just kind of naturally slow down or just stop. And at that point, Russian troops use Orlans. They put up Orlans in the air. This is sign for Orlans, right? Orlan 10. And they sort of fly over here and they correct the fire of the artillery. And basically, even Ukrainian troops can kind of like get this first row or first defensive line, then they essentially being destroyed by the artillery fire. And in most cases, they just retreat, right? So with heavy losses, like without being able to achieve anything or at all. Sometimes, if sort of there is more forces, there is better situation, because this is schematic, right? If they manage to get somewhere and make some kind of crack in the second line, then what Russian troops do, they obviously continue hitting with artillery fire. Then they use this the troops in third line, more and specifically tanks and IFVs, to launch counter attack, right? And then they again kick out Ukrainian troops out. So as a result, as you can see, it's pretty cleverly organized defensive line, defensive, not even line, defensive system, and with the skills that you and Ukrainian side has, that this is a mission impossible, just suicidal mission essentially. Not to mention that there is no effective counter battery fire. So, like in order to penetrate this very well, I would say organized defensive system, you really need to first knock out artillery, right, before you do anything. And there is no effective counter battery fire, even though I said many, many times that Ukraine has a lot more than Russia of this precise, long range artillery pieces, which Russia doesn't have. They just do carpet, not bombing, but carpet shelling here in this area, right? Whenever they do attack Ukrainian troops, so it's all super imprecise old systems, even like for as I said before, like some of them from World War II, essentially. So, or at least they have the same ballistic sort of profile as the systems of World War II, not much different. So as you can see, there is a problem, and the part of the problem is that Ukraine still doesn't have equivalent over LAN 10. That and organizationally there is no structure where there is embedded, let's say our LAN 10 team with the artillery unit, right? So as a result, you have horrific results, and that's why you see this stalemate building start to build up. And as I said, the problem is sort of getting worse and going in the wrong direction for Ukraine, because Russia is getting more and more troops, right? More boots on the ground. So it's becoming more and more challenging and difficult, and every attack just costs a lot of lives for no result. So that's hopefully, that's obviously not the best, I'd say, drawings, but I just want to do schematics so people understand why things are really, you know, on sort of stuck and there is no movement at this point. And in my opinion, there won't be any movement. This is sort of strategic dead end that Ukraine is finding itself at this point, because uh, you need to grow skills to use effectively weapons that Ukraine has, and not just like sort of pressing the button and rockets are flying. And that doesn't, it's not enough to just press the buttons on HIMARS systems to be actually successful in this war. So now let's actually start going through the front line situation. Well, so actually, a quick update on the situation with the energy system in Ukraine. It's hanging in there. It's almost dead, but still manages to survive things simply because Russia did not continue its attacks. And one more important note on a tactical level. So Russia is getting also kamikaze drones from Iran, and they actually turn out to be super effective and efficient. Like just today was like a black day for Ukrainian army. It lost at least two self-propelled howitzers M109. It lost this FH-70 155 millimeter howitzer from Italy. There's some other pieces of equipment. So it's really creating a big problem for Ukrainian troops, and it's all, as I said, it's all primitive, very slow moving Iranian drones. They're not even terribly actually precise. Some of them, if you look at the video, it was just sort of how to say, moved by the wind, and it literally blew up next to the target, probably somewhat damaging target, but really not destroying. So, but they do work, right, in large numbers, and if you have non-existent anti-air defense system and a lot of red tape in the Ukrainian army, and lack of initiative, or where initiative is suppressed and punished in Ukrainian army, that's a result you have, and it may get really bad if Russia uses them in large numbers. Um, this is actually very interesting because Switchblade, like those 600 that Ukraine got, they did not achieve any large successes, or they were actually pretty, I would say, useless largely. However, much more primitive equipment is achieving quite a bit of successes on the battleground. Now let's actually jump to the walks through the battlefield, and we're gonna start. We're gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. So situation along the state border is quiet. I mean, there are some exchanges, but relatively it's fairly quiet. Now let's jump to North Luhansk front line. Things here are more or less the same. The futile attempts by Ukrainian troops to attack and basically reach this area here where I'm showing, but without any success at this point. And I explain you, hopefully it makes more sense now why these attacks are essentially useless, because the way the strategy Ukrainian command is using essentially makes them waste of resources, waste of human lives. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on the North Donbass section of the front line. Here, Wagner mercenaries continuing their attacks, which I would say quite probably costly from a human life perspective. And if you look at the sort of front line here, the actual like tactical, the trenches, it totally looks like either World War One, I don't know, World War Two, like Eastern Front, like World War Two, not the Western Front, World War Two. It's totally, some kind of like a really picture of, World War One, and if anyone watched this All Quiet on the Western Front, which is excellent movie, highly recommend. That does start to look similar to that here as a result, and sort of in terms of what I'm trying to say, that like all dead soldiers, like 20 50 meters away from you, laying, and sort of all of that. So just really apocalyptic views, pictures there. But so far, no luck for the Wagner mercenaries today anywhere here. Similar, as you can see, they are also attacking Bakhmut and south of Bakhmut, but without much success. Now let's quickly look at what's going on at the central Donbass front line. Since here are more or less the same, again, attacks out of this Pisky salient. There are unconfirmed reports that Russian troops actually making more advance in Pervomaisky, which is village right northwest of Pisky. That's obviously creating, as I said, so creating a lot of problems here just on a tactical level for Ukrainian defenses. Then not successful Russian attacks in Marinka, not successful in Novomikhailivka, and as I said, Russian troops really got bogged down in Pavlivka. However, it's kind of like turning into little like a Verdun basically, where both sides are losing heavily there. So it's not just kind of like quiet stalemate. It's just basically looks like a mid grinder there. So that's a situation here. On the rest of the Zaporizhya front line, things are more or less quiet. Now let's check the Kherson bridgehead. Things here are also quiet. I explained already at the beginning about the sort of tactically how things looking here and why Ukrainian troops cannot achieve much at this point. So the real, at the same time, having said all of that about that cleverly organized Russian defenses, the key here is obviously Dnipro River and attacks by HIMARS system, which Russia also doesn't have any strategic answer to. So they continue, and as I said before, Ukrainian troops getting to the point that they start destroying single boats. So this really means that Russia will be eventually deprived of the ability to supply. Well, meaning like it's already under stress, and eventually it will be situation will be such that if Russian troops stayed there for much longer, they may not be able to be withdrawn on the eastern side of Dnieper, because everything is gonna, all of the pontoon bridges, ferries will be destroyed, and there's nothing available right now immediately. So you're gonna be in, essentially, will just entire, it will be huge encirclement. And the kind of troops Russia has here are probably the best troops it has in general on the front line in this war. So if Russia loses these troops here, this would be catastrophic for Russia, essentially. Mostly because of the quality of troops, not the number of troops. Sort of is somewhat, well, to extent irrelevant. Nothing is really irrelevant, but to extent, the most important is the quality of the troops. Because as you can see here, mostly this airborne units, which has a very strong fighting spirit, and they fight pretty well. Let's put it this way. They have problems with equipment, as I said many times before, in terms of the structure, how they organized. It's actually pretty poorly organizationally. They are poorly organized in terms of equipment, what they have. But in terms of fighting, it compensated by strong fighting spirit, basically there. Well, that's it for the day. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.